Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Marilyn Darling Show, and welcome to day 2 of Pen Calligraphy 101. Today we're going to be talking about how to use the tools in Pen Calligraphy. Alright, yesterday we did the tools to start. We made a shopping list of things that you should get. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to use those tools. Alright, so the first thing that you're going to really need is some paper. You're going to need some paper, and you're going to need some guidelines. And you're going to put, I would advise you to also buy a clipboard to put your paper on, so that way it doesn't go sliding around, and it's easily maneuverable with your hands. You don't have to be struggling to get the paper to come up all the time. Ask me how I know. And we're going to put the paper on the guidelines so that you should just be able to see the guidelines underneath. See how the guidelines show through the paper? If your guidelines don't show through the paper, you're probably using a thicker paper than is necessary. What you could also do is you could print your guide sheets out from language, language.com/guide sheet, and then you could write, if you have a ruler, I would suggest getting the ones with the grid lines. That'll make it easier to make a sizable difference. The lines on a typical piece of wide rule notebook paper is about 3/4 of an inch. It's about three quarters of an inch tall. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how big to make the lines when you're making them. I would go as far as to make them about 1/2 of an inch tall. That'll give you enough room to practice. And then as you move on, you can go smaller and smaller, or bigger and bigger, depending on what kind of calligraphy that you want to accomplish. Okay, so we'll do these first lines about yay big. Alright, so the next thing that you should have is a dip pen. A dip pen and a nib. You can use a straight nib holder. They come in many shapes and sizes. Come like this and like this, and also like this. And then you should have dip nibs. These are dip nibs, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And then for extra credit, you can have a little spring I got this one from the inside of one of those clickable pens, those like throwaway clickable pens. It was dead. So I use I will show you how to use the spring to get a little more ink on your nib. Okay, so you should have these things by now, right? Now, let's talk about the pen. Let's talk about the pen, how to use the pen. So, you should have some sort of flexible nib by now. And if you haven't gotten one yet, you can use a flexible fountain pen. You can also use, if you don't have either of those, you can use a pencil, a mechanical pencil. You can use a relatively wide rule pencil, and you can even use a brush marker if you have one. So, the purpose of this is for dip pen. Excuse me. Frog in my throat. So, when you write, you're going to hold it so that the bowl of the pen rests just on the inside of your first finger, and you're going to hold it with your thumb, finger, and middle finger, and you're going to rest it just on the first knuckle here. Okay? And when you're writing, you're going to use your pinky, this little right here, you're going to push this, you're going to put that flat on the paper. Oops, let me zoom out so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So, when you're writing, you don't really want to be resting too much of your hand. You don't want to plant your hand like this and write, okay? You want to always have your finger up so that you're kind of floating above what you're writing. Now, this is my desk. Okay? You should have a flat surface that's about A3 size. Okay? You should have enough space around you to move about, so that way you're not impeded by anything. Okay? Now, when it comes to posture, I'm not very good at posture, but I can show you. You should be sitting upright. You should be sitting upright, and your body should be kind of in a raised position, so that way when you swing your elbow, it doesn't hit the desk. You should be relatively raised, so that way I can't freaking do it with this. You should be raised so that your arms don't hit the your arms don't hit the desk. So you want to lean over as far as you can and just back up just a little bit from letting your elbow hit the desk. And when you're writing, you should not plant your fist. You should not plant your fist unless you're writing very, very, very small. Okay? So you should always keep your finger up, so that way you can see what is going on. Okay? And when you're writing, This is my desk. Okay. So when you're writing, you want to tilt your paper so that way that the lines come to the shoulder that you are writing with. Does that make sense? So this is coming to my right shoulder. And so I want I want to easily be able to come downstroke with that 55-degree angle. Okay? Now, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to tell you that you should be, relaxed and sit up and all that stuff. But you know what? I have found that there are times when you're going to be writing so small, you're not going to be able to see the letters from way up here. You're going to have to get kind of crouched down a little bit in order to see what's going on and in order to make the lettering, look nice. So when you make your letters, you should place your paper about 45 degrees from your center. Okay? And then you're going to move this from side to side and up and down like this. Okay? Now when you use your pen should be let's see, how do I describe this? So this is a flat angle. Your nib should be pointed up just ever so slightly. And if you have a brand new pen, you may need some pliers to bend the flange up just a little tiny bit. Not maybe more than 2 degrees. So it's not completely flat. And the reason for this is when you're making a stroke, the nib, if it's too angled to the page, it will catch on the fibers of the page and you will splatter ink everywhere. Okay, and that's not cute. Nobody likes that. So you want to angle your nib down so that way when you're writing that it's angled just a little bit. It's more glidey to the page instead of sharp because you're going to get spattering. Okay? So, 2 things that you need to keep in mind are that when you make an upstroke, you don't want to put any pressure. You want it to go as light as possible. And then on the downstroke, you want to put pressure. So, when you're making a downstroke, you're coming towards your shoulder. You want to make sure that it's not going sideways or sideways. You don't want to go sideways when you're writing because that's not, you can't write like that. So you want to turn the page instead of turning your body. You understand? So that'll make it easier. It's easier to go this way and this way than it is to go this way and this way. You understand? Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the ink. So I have a faux dinky dip. And what I do is I take my Moon Palace Sumi ink. Has a little eyedropper on it. Some don't come like this. Some come in a big bottle. And then I just fill my dinky dip 9 times up to the top. Almost right up to the top. And if you have a dinky dip with a stability holder, use the stability holder. Or what I did was I broke a piece of some CDs that I wasn't using, and I just hot glued it. I hot glued it to the. Oh, I'm so sorry. I glued it to the CD, so that way I would have more stability. Okay. If you're not using Sumi ink, if you're not using the right kind of Sumi ink, it could definitely not make your time a nice one. And I'll tell you why. Some Sumi inks are a little more thicker, or some are even a little more thinner than regular Sumi ink. And I'll show you what happens when you use the wrong kind of Sumi ink. It will work, but it just takes a little more getting used to. We're going to have some toilet paper handy. Just a little bit. Take a piece. Like so. Okay. We're going to dip the nib in the Sumi ink up to the breather hole. Okay. And we're going to go upstroke. And then we're going to go a micrometer over, come back, and pull. Understroke. Now, because this is really crappy paper. Oh gosh, come on. Because this is really crappy paper, you can see oh, that's why. My thing was on my off button. Stupid. Okay. I don't know why it's being stupid. I'm not getting mad. I'm not getting mad. Okay, so when you will notice that your ink may start to feather. That's just kind of the course of how things go sometimes. So you just have to use whatever you have. Okay? Some Sumi inks will not be very cooperative. Others will be more cooperative. Okay, so this is the CVS Caliber notebook paper. Okay. Okay, so that's some of the basics of how to use the pen. What you want to also do is you want to make sure that the nib is facing up, and you want to make sure that when you're writing that you go up light and you push down and pull towards you to make a thick stroke. And when you're doing a compound curve, you want to go from thin to thick to thin, and then an upstroke. So you want to make kind of a swell and then come back to a point. So a point to a swell, point to swell, point to a swell. And you'll want to practice this over and over and over. Alright, let's see. What else? How do we troubleshoot? What happens if you railroad? You push too hard. You see, when you push too hard, the ink blobs out too fast, and it's not able to keep cohesion, or you may be running out of ink. See, you can only make so many full pressure strokes without running out of ink. So, grain of salt. This is actually some pretty good ink. This is Dizo ink. Alright, so let's talk about using some other inks. You can, if you have some, you can use fountain pen ink with your dip pen calligraphy. And I don't know if you see me doing this, but I'm like wiping my nib off so I don't get, so it doesn't gunk up. Because if you leave it unused for a minute, for as little as a minute, it will start to gum up the pen. Okay, so let's use some fountain pen ink. For example, this here is a Private Reserve Velvet Black, one of my favorite black inks. It's great because you can hold the bottle, and it works kind of just like Sumi ink, only it's thinner. You can use fountain pen ink to do calligraphy with. Just really depends on the type. Some types will be too watery, some types will be too thick. So it really depends. See, pretty good stuff. And eventually it will railroad if it's too thin. Always make sure and have a little jar of water when you're done inking a pen. When you're done using the dip or the whatever, we're just gonna say you ran out of ink. Dip your pen, clean it off as best as you can. Make sure and wipe it dry with some toilet paper or paper towel. And I'll tell you why you want to do this. Your nib will last almost 10 times longer if you clean it properly and dry it off than if you just keep using it and keep using it. I've had this since October. Most pens won't last you a week if you're constantly using them or not taking care of them. It also depends on the paper. If you use rough paper like Canson watercolor paper, it's also going to take a toll on it also, because Canson watercolor paper is very, very rough. Very rough paper. Let's see if we can get it in here. You can see that it's very rough stuff. See all that? You can also hear it. Well, you probably can't because of my air conditioner, but it's a lot rougher on the 300-pound watercolor paper than it is on the I just stabbed myself with my pen. Jeez. Don't drop your pen. Don't drop your pen on your foot. Otherwise you might stab yourself. Okay, let's get into using other nibs. If you have a straight pen holder, most pen holders will look kind of like this. In this little bit here, there's some prongs. Just pull this out really quick. This is called a ferrule. And there's these little bits of metal that hold the nib in place. What did I do with it? So when you put the nib in, it goes between these little tines here and the outer of that ferrule, and it kind of holds it in place by friction. It's friction fit. Okay? And so your pen is going to look like this. Alright. Now, right when you first get your nibs and your pens, you're gonna want to clean them, and I will go over that tomorrow. But what you can do is you can take a clean toilet paper towel. I did buy some brand new nibs for this, so I want to show you exactly what I'm going to do. These are brand new nibs. I haven't used them yet. Okay. I have here, this is a Tachikawa G nib, and a what is this? This is a Hunt Imperial. Oh, this is a Hunt 101. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is take your napkin, gather up a little bit of spit on the end of your tongue, and put it in the napkin. Never put a sharp nib in your mouth. And you're going to take and you're going to rub the underside of the nib and then the overside of the nib, because there are oils on the nib that need to be taken off before you can use them properly. Now you could just take this over to the sink and use some soap and some and a little bit of a toothbrush maybe, but I just put a little bit of spit and then I use a corner to get in there, because you don't want any of those oils on the nib, otherwise it won't let the ink stick to the nib. You can also use a little bit of this is rubbing alcohol, a little bit of rubbing alcohol on there, and just clean the nib off. And you will notice that sometimes the coating will have a color, and you will be able to see a color change happen on the nib. And you want to make sure that once you clean the nib, that you don't touch the tip of the nib with your fingers, because your fingers have oil on them, and the oil is not, it doesn't like water. Water and oil basically don't mix, so you don't want to put oil on the tip of your nib, otherwise the ink won't stick to it. So I haven't cleaned this Tachikawa nib. I'm going to show you what happens when the nib isn't cleaned. So you're going to stick your nib in, and do you see that? Hardly any ink stuck to it. Okay, and it's not coming down to the tip of the nib. So you see, it's not really sticking good. Okay, so after you clean your nib, some rubbing alcohol, a little bit of spit, just get in there. Don't touch the tip of the nib with your fingers. And now we're going to see how the nib. You see how that's much better? The nib is actually holding a lot more ink, and it's not just falling off the end of the nib. And now it is ready to write. Let's see if I did a good job with this one. You see how that holds a lot of ink? I wish you could see better. See how it's holding the ink now? Also, be careful you don't drop it in there, because otherwise then you're going to need some tweezers. Okay, so now that we have clean nibs, now when you buy nibs, I highly recommend that you buy more than one of each. If you get a Hut 101, get a couple of them. Get 2 or 3 of them. Because there is eventually going to be one that will not work. It's going to be scratchy, it's going to be uncooperative, and the only way to get it to be even the slightest bit cooperative is by grinding it. And we will go over grinding later. Alright. So now that we have a nice clean nib, I'm going to pick a pen to put it in. Alright, we have our pen. We're going to put the Tachikawa G in the nib holder, placing it in between the middle and the outside of the ferrule. Okay. And then we're going to dip it in some ink past the breather hole. And we're gonna write a little bit. Okay. See how smooth it is? How smooth it writes? If you have an older nib, it will be scratchy in all directions. It will basically be unusable and very unpleasant to write with. So once it gets to that point, just put it in a napkin and throw it away. Okay. I'm just checking to make sure that my nib is working. You will come upon inks that won't come off the nib, and those are probably inks that are too thick. You need to add some water. If you have the ability to buy distilled water, that's the best kind of water. If not, just use regular tap water. Boil it. Boiled tap water is usually the best. Takes out all the microbes and the whatnot, so that way you don't contaminate your ink. And then you should be able to add that 1 drop at a time into the ink to make it flow nicely. And then if it's too thin, what you might be able to do is you could just leave the container open or partially closed and maybe put it inside of another container, so that way that you know that that's evaporating, and that way you don't like tip it over or try and use it without the cap on, or something to let you know that there is an open container and not to use it and pull off the cap, something that you're not going to spill it, because Sumi ink does not come out of carpet. Let me repeat that again. Sumi ink does not come out of the carpet. Okay, it will not come out of your clothes. If it gets on your clothes, they're just going to be that color forever. Okay? You might be able to lighten it up, but it's not going to go anywhere. This is charcoal, bamboo charcoal, which is wood burn. It's basically ash. That's bamboo ash. And it's mixed with water and some thickeners like gum arabic. If you find that your ink is too watery, if it's just too watery, and you don't want to leave it out, you can add. I wouldn't suggest using a big thing like this. I would use a dinky dip's worth of separated Sumi ink and use oh, where did it go? Where did you go, George? Oh God. Oh, there it is. You could use 1 or 2 drops of gum arabic, and that will thicken it up. The problem with using gum arabic is that it will take way longer to dry. This is a thickener. It's also used as a sheening agent. So this is used for elongating the water in your ink. It's kind of like using gelatin. It's like a liquid gelatin. And so you can imagine that it absorbs the water and holds on to it for a longer period of time, and releases the water vapor very, very slowly. And so if you live in a humid environment, you might not want to use the gum arabic as an additive. You might just try and leave it out, let it sit on the counter somewhere in a warmer next to the stove or something. Somewhere where it's not going to be tipped over, but somewhere that it's going to be warmer than your ambient temperature. If your ink is not sticking, not coming off the nib, it might be because the surface tension is too much. When you have too much water tension, sometimes the ink will sit at the just high enough on the nib that it won't come down. And in that case, you need to clean your nib. Clean your nib. Make sure that it's not the nib's fault, because sometimes it can be the ink's fault, and sometimes it can be the nib's fault. Clean your nib. Rinse it off in some water. Shake it dry. Wipe it off. Make sure that you can see that there's a little bit of slit in there. Make sure that the slit is nice and cleaned so that there's no gunk on it, and then try and ink again. And you want to dip it in the ink just past the breather hole. That's the little hole in the nib. So the nib Comes out like this. And there's a little hole. And this is the breather hole. So you want to dip it just past that hole. Maybe even a little farther past that hole. Dip just past the breather hole. Okay? Of course, this is upside down. So, when you dip it, you want to dip your pen just past the breather hole. Of course, we all know that water doesn't actually look like that. It's more of a swoop, but you get the idea. And then we should be ready to start. Of course, you want to try your pen out, just doing a couple of little swirls like this. Kind of rotate your pen in your hand while you're writing to get an idea of where the ink will stop flowing, and if it doesn't stop in any direction, that's kind of interesting, but you should be able to use it with the breather hole up and applying a little bit of pressure and then letting up, making some figure eights. Okay? And if you don't have fancy paper, there usually is a CVS nearby somewhere. You can order some from Amazon, get some nice paper. Go to cvspharmacy.com and search for caliber filler paper. That's what this is. This is good stuff. This is great for practice. Also, HP Premium 32-pound copy paper is also good paper for practicing calligraphy. You can even get a dip pen fountain pen. This is called an Ackerman pump pen, and it comes just like a fountain pen does. Comes with a little cartridge. You fill the cartridge, put it in there, and then the ink comes through the middle and out the middle of the pen, enabling you to write without having to dip, which is a major convenience for somebody who doesn't like to dip their pens often. Of course, you could just use where did it go? We'll talk about that later. So now that we've talked about the tools and how you're supposed to use them, I think that this would be a good place to stop for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I'm very curious to know what you guys think, and I will answer all of the questions with either a video response on my YouTube channel, or I will try and make a private message to you. Sunday, this is probably something I should tell y'all. Sunday, no, not Sunday, sorry. Saturday, tomorrow is Saturday. Saturday, February 4th, 2023 at 4 p.m. I will be doing a Zoom call so that you guys can ask me questions face to face. And we can practice a little bit of how to flex your pen. Okay, and that will basically include going up light and coming down hard. Going up light and coming down hard. Of course, you can practice that on your own. Okay, well. Let's see. Have I talked about everything that I wanted to talk about today? Pen holder and a nib, paper, an hour, dinky dip, towel, paper, pencil, ruler, Valentine's Day card. If you have not done so already, you should also probably buy some 300-pound watercolor paper, because we're going to be doing some writing on some 300-pound watercolor paper. We're going to make a little Valentine's Day card. Probably by the end of the week. So, that is all for today. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. I hope that you learned something. Follow me on social media. Like this video. Comment. Subscribe. Ring the little bell, make sure it's set to all, so when I upload new content, YouTube notifies you, and I will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. for another video. So, take care until then. Okay, love you, bye. Have a great day.